I have already achieved half of my goal. 500 days have already passed, but they were still quite relaxed. From now on, I want to create even more, experience even more, and above all, build even more. Have fun with the 600 days. So my friends, here we are again. I started the 501 day by collecting all my tropical fish and then buying enough name tags. Of course, I renamed them brilliantly and brought a total of 7 new fish into the giant aquarium, which already contained 26 fish. Then I collected the produce from all the farms because I had forgotten the last episode at the end, and the carrots, for example, got their own new storage space because I already had way too many of them. With the sugarcane, the pumpkins, and the eggs, I then, as always, crafted a few 6 pumpkin pies, of which I had already almost filled the 3rd box. Since I didn't have any more gunpowder, I stood at the creep arm for a few minutes, which allowed me to craft a few stacks of rockets again. I then dyed 4 more sheep at the wool farm yellow, because I would need a lot more yellow wool than white for the pixel art. Now I wanted to continue with the city, where construction could begin. Well, I think the house is quite nice, especially this passage that I built in front of it is something different, and the first chimney in the city was now there. I then sorted out all the building materials so that I could reuse all the sound boxes that were just standing there. When I was about to fly away, I just met this wandering trader who was selling these cool blue orchids, so I quickly got Smag Day and bought 8 pieces of them, and am still preparing from him. Afterwards, I finally wanted to build a dedicated place for concrete farming, and I chose the place next to the stone farm. There, I built a platform, and immediately afterwards, I started building the concrete converter, or actually 2 of them. I couldn't just leave it there, so I immediately started building a panel until I at least ran out of pine wood. I had to take a short break with wood farming, but I was able to finish the next cube right after that. As you can see, I added a small C, which should logically stand for concrete. The interior wasn't finished yet, so I took a quick look at that too. Now I was actually finished and quite happy with it. I tested the converter briefly, and of course, everything worked fine. I then briefly built the path a little further so that I could walk over, and the next cube was there. This meant I was finally able to dismantle the ugly, temporary converter, which really didn't look nice. Then I flew around a bit and just happened to see this. The box simply had a book inside that simply said World of Tanks Blitz, the sponsor of this video. World of Tanks Blitz is a legendary mobile MO shooter that you can play on PC, mobile, or even Switch. Choose one of over 400 historical and unique, or even fantasy-themed vehicles with which you can then go into battle. Fight in the 7 against 7 format on a total of 32 maps and 8 different game modes, where you can achieve victory with a variety of strategies. The seasons have been newly added and extend over 3 months, such as the new season Ritutopia. They offer a new gaming experience through a series of events, promotions, rewards, and promotions, each linked to an exciting story. The Lukas Podolski Season 1 is now starting, and you can take part in the exclusive Top Scorer US. By successfully completing the stages, you will unlock a number of rewards directly from Lukas Podolski. For example, an avatar or a collector's item in the form of a football jersey with Lukas Podolski's signature. In addition, you can now earn kit coins in Season 1 and use them to purchase 3 unique seasonal tanks of the highest tier. I definitely think the game is pretty cool, which 140 million downloads can only confirm. Download World of Tanks Blitz now for free via the QR code or via the link in the video description and become top scorer alongside Lukas Podolski. But the quest only goes up to 18 June, so be quick. The next thing I tackled was the new villagers. I traded these all the time for the next few days, maxing one after the other. I also bought a lot of nonsense, but I had to do it. I also used the night to get a zombie to zombify the villagers, where I could then become a zombie octor again. What was also absolutely premium is that I got the pumpkin and melon raid from every single farmer. The last few villagers all gave me full extortionate prices because I killed 2 of their colleagues beforehand, but I had to go through with it. I was already so rich anyway. On the 515 night, I brought the last zombie into the last villager section, and I think I earned the first bells, which I then had fun with for a bit. I then briefly went to the gold farm to get gold for the last few trades, and when I went through the portal again, this just happened. Yeah, I have no idea how it got in there. Well, I repaired the portal room briefly, which also meant I had to go to the warped forest to get the savings. The little incident was now fixed, and I was able to max the last villager. So now I was done, and the villagers were all at master level. There are a few unnecessary ones, but also very, very important ones. As you can see, I had an incredible amount of dyed leather armor, so I quickly crafted a few Cupid stands and decorated the houses in my new city. I wanted to enliven the city outside a bit, so 3 passers-by came there, which I think looks pretty funny anyway. Now I finally wanted to tackle the advancements, which I have completely ignored so far. To start, I decided on the nether advancements, for which I grabbed a lodestone from my old storage, placed it in my nether ace, and activated a compass on it. Next up was traveling, for which I traveled a little over 1,000 blocks in the nether, and then went through a portal. It was pretty empty in the overworld. On the way back, I made a quick stop at a bastion, where I snacked on a few gold blocks, but otherwise, nothing special. Next up was the Furious Cocktail, where I had to have every potion effect at the same time. So, I spent the next day brewing, including the Turtle Master's potion, of which I was only able to brew 3 in total. I was even luckier when a random creeper simply showed up and blew up the brewing stations, and exactly 2 of the Turtle Master potions survived. I had really been completely lucky, but when I had all the 13 potions together, the moment of truth had come. I threw them all on my head, one after the other, and finally the Turtle Master potion, which then gave me the achievement. I then wanted to fly to my camp, which this time took a little longer. The next advancement was the Respawn Anchor, which also found its place in the Nether Hub. And after going glowstone farming for the first time in over 500 days, I loaded up, opened it fully, and the next thing was done. For the final nether, I crafted a fishing rod, then put a warped fungus on it and spread a strider across the lava, which was the final advancement for the nether. Oh, and I didn't know a strider could run that fast. Now it was the turn of the next category, and the first thing I did was weigh down an iron golem that didn't have to live very long. Then I wanted to tackle the Monster Hunter achievement, where you had to kill every enemy mob, which apparently only needed a piglin brood or a revenger. So I flew to a bastion and looked in vain for a piglin brood. I didn't really check that, and when I looked, I realized that these were only added in the 1.16.2 version, and on which 1.16.1 played. Well, at least now I knew I was still missing the revenger. Oh yeah, and apart from a piece of netherite, there was nothing exciting as a reward. Back home, I enchanted a bow on power 3 and unbreaking 3, with which I killed a skeleton from 50 meters away. Then I crafted a target block where I had to hit the center, i.e. the bullseye, from 30 meters away. I also briefly farmed levels and enchanted a new bow on power 3, unbreaking 3, and of course infinity. I then placed the block near the city and the shooting could begin, and let me tell you, it was such a scam. I easily shot a few hundred times until finally, one shot hit the bullseye. Then, I was really happy. Next, I think I crafted a crossbow for the first time in my life, where I then picked up another achievement. For the next one, I needed a pillager, so I went with the oneblock. And, oh yes, in a replay recording from the last episode, I accidentally discovered that half of the blocks were simply not sorted because I had built it too poorly. I repaired that briefly, and now there should be no more losses. I stood for a little more than 10 minutes until I reached the first pillager, but then I shot it down and immediately got the next achievement. The third of the crossbow advancements was the most difficult, for which I upgraded a crossbow to piercing 4. Then I built the mini construction straight away, and now I just had to wait for phantoms. Until then, I carried on, shot a slime with a trident, and then repaired it, which I then enchanted again, where I was really extremely lucky. Exactly the enchantments I wanted. And finally, I added unbreaking 3 and mending. I then renamed it 3 Million Trident, where I really have to say thank you for the great support on my 1000 Days film. Then I continued with the end, where I was only missing one thing. So I flew to an NED and climbed a total of 50 blocks, which is really one of my favorite achievements. Next on the list was casting an end eye, which oddly enough didn't work in the world. Well, now it was the turn of the balance eat, for which I collected every meal together and then ate it all at once on the 526th day. I ate everything except an OP old apple. That was the only thing I was missing. Since I'm playing oneblock, there are only two ways I can get it: in a nether bastion or in a portal mine. So I made my way into the nether and the search could begin. At the beginning, I looted every bastion until I researched briefly and realized that the OP old apple can only be in the largest bastion at the bottom near the magma spawner. So nothing exciting happened for the next few days. I just kept looting the gold in the boxes. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the OP old apple. After an hour, something exciting happened to me for the first time. I barely survived by half my heart. Well, I searched in vain for over an hour, where I even almost died twice and lost a totem each time. So the concentration really wasn't the best anymore. After a journey of over 20 zero blocks, I finally arrived back at my nether hub. Unfortunately, still without an OP old apple, but the loot didn't look too bad either. Back at home, I collected all the wool and stood for a bit at the new concrete converter for yellow concrete. Since I was out of torches and coal, I flew to her skeleton arm and got 2 stacks of coal. During the night, I waited for phantoms to actually spawn. I lured them into the boat, gave them each 2 diamond XT-its and a fist-it, and hoped that I could achieve the achievement with the crossbow, which luckily I did. Now it was that time again and I continued with pixel art, which is really tiring to build because I want to place every single block correctly. At the end of the session, I was quite satisfied because I had really made a lot of progress. I then looked at the advancements again and wanted to tackle the next step, namely breeding each animal species once. To do this, I first flew into the nether, bred 2 striders and then hoglins, which strangely took forever. Next, I tried the pandas, which somehow didn't work, and the llamas, which also didn't work. The problem was that I hadn't tamed the llamas before, so I did that and suddenly it worked. Then I wrote down a list of all the animals that I still had to breed so that I had an overview. The following still needed to be done. I had no time to waste, so I went straight to the warning block. Relatively at the beginning, rabbits spawned, which I was able to breed and thus cross off the list. A little while later, foxes spawned and I could do the same to them. And a little later, there were the bees, which I find it really strange that you can breed them even though they are aggressive towards you. That night, I tried to tame the horse and donkey, but somehow it didn't work. I didn't know why, but I just left it at that. After the long oneblock session, I sorted through the leftovers, which is still a hate activity of mine. Well, now I finally wanted to get on with my zoo again, and so I prepared all the things, including the stems of brown mushrooms, for the next cabins that I would have at 544. Day then construction began. As you can see, I built 5 more cabins. But I still didn't have enough slime locks for the slime abine, so I grabbed them from my storage and finished them. Now the mobs were still missing, which was the first thing I brought in the slime, and I really didn't know that they could do so much damage. Next, I built a railway line over and brought a villager to its new home. Then I came up with the brilliant idea of bringing the horse and donkey to the animal island. And when I noticed that the donkey was eating the grass, I knew immediately that that was why I couldn't tame them before. But now it worked, and after I had tamed her, I bred her and got a mule. I then tried the donkeys, which worked this time, and so I was able to cross them off the list. I then took a donkey with me and brought him to the zoo. Next in line was an iron golem, and now all that was missing was a husk and a bat. On the 548th day, I collected the eggs from the egg island and crafted some pumpkin pies again, which I already have. 4th box began. Then I stood back at the oneblock and hoped for a husk or a bat. In fact, after a few minutes, 4 husks spawned, one of which I then took to the zoo. I probably still need the boarneck for the bat. Now I wanted to continue building in the city again, so I farmed spruce wood, thought briefly about what I should build, and then started right away. As you can see, it turned out to be a tower that I even connected to a house. I then built the interior, but unfortunately, I ran out of leather for the books. So I went to Nether for some leather and was then able to use it to build the magic table room. I also finished building the other floors and finally beautified the outside area. But then I was finished and can now present it to you. Since I ran out of leather before and didn't have a stable leather arm, I wanted to tackle it now. So I prepared the few things, went to the nether corner, and started building a hoglin arm, which obviously worked well. Afterwards, I stood for a bit by the stone arm. With the stone I had farmed, I then went next to the creeper arm and built a platform for the wooden arm there. Now a little less wood should be lost. I then farmed wood there with a few stools. The yield wasn't too bad. I then set up a beacon for the next time, but the good thing now is that I can also farm yarn powder in the meantime. Next, I removed the extremely ugly farm platforms, which was urgently needed. With all the new rockets, I went back into the nether and looked for an OP old apple. And yes, I looked for it for about 3 hours, but was unfortunately disappointed. But the yield was again brutal. Back at home, I dismantled my very first house because it just didn't fit anymore, and I wanted to renovate the main base anyway. Then, I repaired my things briefly and went to the warning block. After about half an hour, I bred 2 dogs and got a little closer to the achievement. A little later, when I had 2 pandas and they didn't want to reproduce, I did a quick research and realized that I had to build an area with a little bamboo in front of them so that they could finally reproduce. So I only had to breed 2 of these 3 animals. I was still at the warning block until the 580 day, but I didn't get anything useful there. Immediately afterwards, I had to sort something again because the warehouse was completely overflowing again. Now I wanted to continue with the city again, and to do this, I farmed some oak wood, after which the building could begin. The house looked really nice from the outside, but of course I still had to build the interior. So I built the lower floor first and then the upper floor, which I was really happy with. Finally, I brought carrots into the house because I want to store them there in the future, and then I was actually finished. Time to show you. Now I wanted to continue with the pixel art, so I first farmed some sand that I wanted to melt into glass. But I ran out of fuel again, so I flew to the Wither skeleton farm and stood there for about 10 minutes, getting everything sorted out. I then had a bit of black concrete powder farmed, which I then turned into normal concrete using the concrete onverter. But then I was actually ready and continued building with the pixel art. I finished it on 600 day, and I think you can already see what it's going to be. As always, I collected all the farm produce from the 100 days, which, as always, was just tough. But then it was already night, and I flew to my almost finished city. That was it. I survived 600 days in Minecraft Hardcore 1 block without dying.